Welcome to the Fantasy Draft Weekly Rundown. Joining me, as always, is co-host and NFL Ironman London Fletcher. London, it's been a while since we've done one of these. Welcome back to the daily fantasy world. First of all, have you been playing any baseball or basketball in the off season?
You mean me personally playing, or are
Yeah,
you talking about
yeah.
playing on fantasy draft site?
Of course, I'm talking about playing on fantasy draft.
I played a little bit of basketball. I can't say that I played much baseball, but I've been watching the Indians. My Indians are doing pretty good, but
There you go. Well,
it's a
hopefully
great
we're
time. It's a great time to be from Cleveland.
yeah, they got a hell of a team, I must say. But we're getting back to your bread and butter now. It's back to football time. We're all excited. How's your off season been? What have you been up to?
All season's going great. Just playing a lot of golf, working on my golf game, getting my tan, working on my tan out at the swimming pool, things like that. Spending time with the family, going on vacations.
There you go. So it looks like it's been a stressful few months for London working on his golf game and his vacations. But now that we're back in football, it's been an eventful off season. Let me go through a few things. We know Le'Veon Bell and Tom Brady been suspended. We had Carlos Williams released for a multitude of reasons. We're not sure if J.J. Watt's going to be back. So a lot of things going on. But let's look at the glass half full because those things are all negative. What acquisition for a team or maybe even a draft pick are you bullish on for this upcoming season?
I look at well, there can be two that definitely jump out right away. The one obviously is Josh Norman going from Carolina to Washington. He solidifies a position of need for the Washington Redskins. You look at their defensive secondary a year ago; they were just a group of guys that were getting by. They dealt with a lot of injuries. I think he and Breland can form a good dynamic duo at the cornerback position. You kind of wonder why would Carolina let him go. They rescinded the franchise tag, so maybe they know something that the Washington Redskins doesn't know. Another acquisition that stands out to me from a trade standpoint is Chandler Jones going to the Arizona Cardinals. New England decided they were going to trade Chandler. I'm sure they looked at it. Hey, we got him coming up. We got Jamie Collins being free, and also Hightower. Those guys are all going to be free agents after this season. Our chances of signing the other two guys or re-signing the other two guys are better. So they traded him to Arizona. And you look at for Arizona, they needed a pass rusher. One of the reasons why they relied on the blitz so much was because they couldn't get to the quarterback with just their four-man rush. So you look at him, bring him into the fold. He's going to play the outside linebacker position for them. So I look at those as being two great moves this offseason.
Yeah, and Norman sure hasn't been shy about talking since he's got there. But his yeah, his acquisition kind of puts a wrinkle in week one. So that's going to be interesting because Antonio Brown against the Redskins, before him, you looked at that, you said, okay, that's an auto start. Now I think people are going to rethink that. So that will be interesting, definitely for week one. London, since you're the go-to source for defense, is there a defense that you think made some nice changes over the offseason that now goes from a mid-tier or a lower tier defense into one that we should really be looking at in terms of both fantasy and reality as taking the next step?
Oh, absolutely. The one that jumps out to me the most is the Jacksonville Jaguars. You look at what they did in free agency. They went out, they signed Malik Jackson, who was really the number one rated defensive player, probably the number one free agent in all of football this past offseason. So they signed him. They get Tashawn Gibson, the free safety from Cleveland. He was a guy who led the NFL in interceptions a couple seasons ago. Then you look at what they did in the draft. They get Jalen Ramsey, who was the best rated on a lot of people's board. He was the best rated player coming out this year in the draft. And then they get Miles Jack, who, if he had not gotten injured during the regular season in college, he would have been a top 5 pick. So they added Jack in the second round. They got Jalen Ramsey, and then they get Dante Fowler, another guy who was injured a season ago as a rookie. They get him back into the mix. So you've added 5 guys that can start for you, that are going to start for you on your defense right away. So I look at those additions to the Jacksonville Jaguars defense as putting them into Probably a top 10 type of defense. I would expect them to be a top 10 defense.
Yeah, I think people should take that into consideration when rostering Jaguars this year. I think Hearns and Robinson were some of the garbage time heroes, and there may not be some of that with a better Jaguars team this year. Let's get to the picks because we're all excited about it, and of course, we've had it circled for a long time. And let's start with quarterbacks, and I'll begin at this position. A guy I love, not just for week one, it just so happens that he gets the greatest matchup in week number one, is Derek Carr. I mean, you look at this offensive line, and I know everyone gives the Cowboys all the credit, but according to Pro Football Focus, and really you just look at it, according to anyone, I mean, there's no weak links in it. This is the best offensive line in football now. They replaced Jamarcus Webb, who's been a career we'll call him a journeyman to be nice, with Kelechi Azamele, who's one of the best guards in football. So now you look at Carr, who threw 30 plus touchdowns last year. He's got Murray in the backfield. He's got some weapons, Cooper, Crabtree, Walford, and now he faces a Saints team that allowed the most quarterback fantasy points last year. We all know Delvin Breaux's a good player, but number one wide receivers still averaged better than average in terms of fantasy points last year. So Derek Carr all around, I mean, I think he'll be able to find Cooper. I think he'll be able to find everyone, and they're certainly not going to get to him much with that line. I love Derek Carr at 13,700 for week one. Who do you like at quarterback?
The guy that I love this year, week one, coming out the gate is Jameis Winston going against the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. One of the reasons why I love him is because I expect a bounce back type of year for Mike Evans, and though Mike had over 1,200 yards, most people looked at that as a down year for him. I know he really committed himself into getting into the best shape of his life. He and Jameis had an offseason to work out. They did some workouts together during the offseason to work on their chemistry. You look at Safarian Jenkins. I think the light kind of turned on for him this preseason, where he's going to be a big player for them. And then you still have Vincent Jackson, so you have quality players. And then also you look at Doug Martin. So teams are going to say, all right, well, let's take away Doug Martin, stack an eighth man in the box, and he'll get some opportunities to go one-on-one with his receiver. So Jameis Winston, I feel, is going to be a really good pick for week one, good play for week one. And then you look at Atlanta's defense. They didn't do a whole lot to upgrade that defense, especially the pass rush. I think only 19 sacks a season ago, not enough pressure on the quarterback. When you look at that and look at the weapons that Jameis Winston has to work with, I like him as a play week one.
There you go. That's another guy I really like for the whole season. So, I think week one's a good time just to start good players because we don't really know how these defenses are going to fare, and those are two good players. So start building your team around those quarterbacks. Let's move to running back. And I think this guy's a good player that may go under the radar at least early in terms of Duke Johnson of the Cleveland Browns. We know Hugh Jackson loves running that two-back set. I mean, we saw it in Cincinnati with Gio Bernard and Jeremy Hill, and we kind of saw that, at least for the fantasy draft format with the catches, that Bernard was the guy producing more fantasy points unless, Hill got into the end zone, which was few and far between last year. So I think it's going to be kind of the same setup. I mean, Isaiah Kroll posted an inflammatory post on Facebook early this preseason, didn't help his cause, and the beat writers kind of speculating that they think Johnson's going to catch 70 plus passes this year. So that certainly interests me. I think he could lead the team in touches. So I'm just going with the guy that I think is a good player again. Week one opponent, the Eagles, allowed the 10th most rushing touchdowns last year and ranked middle of the pack in terms of DVOA, which is a Football Outsiders statistic that I love to use. So basically, running backs fared pretty well against them. And again, I think this guy's just going to be a staple in the offense with RG3 under pressure. He loves the dump offs. I think Duke Johnson gets it going with the catches week one, and he pays off at that price tag. So London, who do you like at running back?
The guy I'm going to go with that running back week one is Carlos Hyde for the San Francisco 49ers going against the St. Louis Rams defense. And I know the Rams are known for being one of the upper echelon defenses in the National Football League. That's more for their ability to get after the quarterback with their pressure package and also their defensive front. As I look at the new Chip Kelly era in San Francisco, he's going to lean heavy on his running back. If you look at what he did in Philadelphia, his first year with LaShawn McCoy, Sean McCoy led the NFL in rushing yards. I think he rushed for over 1,600 yards. So I expect Carlos Hyde to be the bell cow, especially early in the season. They also like to throw the ball to his to the running back. So he'll I expect him to get close to 100 yards rushing, and maybe catch 3 or 4 passes in that ball game. So that's that. Carlos Hyde is a really good play for me.
There you go. Let's move on to wide receiver, and I'm going to go with one that people are going to, those who like to look at stats in previous games are not going to be happy about this one because Odell Beckham Jr., you look at his numbers against the Cowboys last year, they weren't great, honestly, but it's a new year and we've got ourselves a good player. And again, I like to just use those good players and look at those defensive stats overall. And if he struggled 2 games, I'm chalking him up to outliers. I mean, let's not forget that Odell Beckham made that unbelievable catch against Brandon Carr. So we're talking about that team. He's had a little bit of success against. I expect this to be a high scoring affair in terms of the Giants and Cowboys. I'm not in love with either defense really. And the Cowboys did rate poorly against opposing #1 wide receivers. So I think maybe they'll shift some attention to him. But now they got Sterling Shepard to kind of take some away, and he supposedly looked really good. So I think the Cowboys will have no choice but to respect them both, and that could mean a big day for Odell Beckham. I like him in week 1. Who do you got at wide receiver?
I'm going back to Golden Tate. I don't know if you remember in 2014 when he had the big breakout type of season
Yep.
when Megatron was injured. So no Megatron this year for the Detroit Lions. I look forward to being the Golden Tate show really early and often. In 2014, he had 99 receptions for over 1,300 yards. They've signed Marvin Jones to be the #2 receiver. So I look at Golden Tate as being the clear-cut #1 receiver. In Detroit, you look at Indianapolis, they were 26 in points, fantasy points allowed to wide receivers in last season. So I look for a big year for Golden Tate and a big game for Golden Tate against the Indianapolis Colts.
I have to agree with you there. I'm a big Tate fan this year. Let's move to tight end, and I don't want to be too obvious, but I'm going to go with the guy who led the league in catches at the tight end position last year, in Delanie Walker. Again, week 1, I'm going to keep him. Yeah, I'm going to keep hammering it. The guys who've gotten it done are the ones that I want to use. And again, I'm going to go back to that defense adjusted value over average statistic from Football Outsiders. If you need a link, just message me on Twitter. But Minnesota gave up about 16% above average production to opposing tight ends. So you got a good player, you got a defense who struggled. I think they added DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry to kind of work the run game, and I think Delanie Walker's still the guy in the pass game when they want to switch it up. So I think this is just a perfect mix of last year's statistics, a good player, and a guy they're going to have to rely on. I think Walker's a pretty solid lock. Who you got at tight end?
I'm going to go with Jordan Reed for the Washington Redskins. And no, it's not a homer pick, Ricky. When you look at him, he gets the opening Monday Night Football game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are one of the in the lower third in the National Football League, allowing points to the tight end position. Jordan Reed is a dynamic matchup nightmare for opposing defenses. Season ago, he had 87 catches, but more importantly, he had 11 TDs. So you look at him continuing to be a matchup nightmare. I'm sure the Washington Redskins will look to either isolate him against the Pittsburgh Steelers linebackers or safety. And this guy runs routes like a wide receiver. He is unguardable one-on-one. I look for Jordan Reed to have a big game against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
There you go. And I know we didn't talk about it before the show, but defense is a category. There's one defense that stands out to me. You mentioned Carlos Hyde. I'm wondering if you're going to let me ask you this way. Would you start Carlos Hyde and the Rams defense because Blaine Gabbert is so terrible?
I guess that's like, can you do both? Maybe, I guess you could.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed to starting the Rams defense against Blaine Gabbert. When you look at it, there's not a lot of weapons on offense in San Francisco, so you figure one of the ways that they can win the game or try to stay in the ball game is to run the football. I'm sure they don't want Blaine Gabbert to make mistakes and turn the football over, and I don't think they have the wide receivers that can put enough pressure on the Rams defensive backs to create plays. So I wouldn't be opposed to starting the Rams defense.
Yeah, let me just say that's an underutilized tournament strategy that if there's going to be a defense score multiple touchdowns and give up big points. There's still going to be high scoring. So if you can somehow figure out who's the guy who's going to score against them and pick the defense that scores multiple times, I mean, no one else is going to use that strategy. People do not like using players against the defense. So I think that could be an interesting way to go. Now, London, let's get to everyone's favorite segment of this when users get to ask you questions. They get to grill you like I do on every show. So let's go with the first question on Twitter. This is obvious. This was the one that we knew was going to come up. How did you manage to survive these 9 months without Ricky's puns?
Well, let's just say I didn't miss it. I didn't miss your puns. I went to rehab, got some therapy, treatment, all those things that I needed to get over your puns.
Let's just say you're not the first who had to go through that strenuous recovery process after talking to me. I'm just going to assume it's everyone else's issue and not mine. But let's move on. We got a question on Facebook that I think you'll like. Who do you think is this is from Rick Strom, by the way, our buddy from 120 Sports. He asks, who's the hardest player in the current NFL to tackle in the open field?
Whew, in the open field, man, I guess I always thought the little scat backs were more difficult to deal with. You know, a guy like a Darren Sproles would be definitely a difficult open field type of tackle. Um, he comes to mind right away. Think who else? Probably Odell Beckham Jr. would be a difficult challenge, 1-on-one tackle for a cornerback. Not me, but for a cornerback. Oh, LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
think
who
it was
stood
McCoy.
out. Yeah.
McCoy is definitely the toughest guy to tackle in the open field 1-on-one.
Yeah, I don't think there'll ever be another Barry Sanders, but he was the guy I was going to say, that kind of stands out to me is the guy who seems to have a one-on-one, fake a juke one way and just make a guy lose his shoes like you really don't see that much. So LaShawn McCoy is definitely a strong case to be made for him. And then we've got one specific to week one from John Path on Facebook. He asked, and we know you like Golden Tate, is Riddick a strong, cheap play on the road at Indy? This is Theo Riddick.
Strong, I don't know if it'll be strong because he's gonna. I know he's gonna share the load with Amir Abdullah there, and Indies they're pretty good against not allowing receivers. I mean running backs to catch the ball.
Right.
Now Riddick is another guy who they going to utilize in the passing game, and it's a PPR on fantasy draft. So he may catch 2 or 3 passes, but I don't know that he'll score. So is it going to be worth saying he's a strong play? Maybe a mediocre type of play would be a better statement.
Yeah, let me suggest if you want a receiving back, go and Duke Johnson. We mentioned him earlier. There's a bunch of running backs in the league that catch passes now. So Riddick's definitely one of them, but I don't think he is one of the better matchups. You can definitely look for some other guys. Well, London, go ahead.
Shane Vereen
Yes.
for the Giants. He's a guy. If he's healthy, he's definitely shown that he can win those one-on-one matchups with linebackers and safeties.
Yeah, again, we love that game is high scoring. It feels like we're in midseason form, London. You made fun of me. We got through a show, a few laughs. So I think we're doing pretty well. Until next time, I'm Ricky Sanders with London Fletcher, and we're out.